what's the best way for a WordPress developer to talk about CSPs with their clients, and how can developers convince clients that their sites needs a CSP?
A site, if a web developer is working on a site in particular that involves commerce, then I think that would be an easy conversation, right? Because that site could theoretically be hacked despite all of the efforts being made, and then that would literally impact the bottom line. Whereas if it has the CSP in place, it would continue to protect the users. I think with other clients, it might be difficult to talk to them about it, because the thing with security is that until someone experiences the opposite of security, they don't think it's important. Kind of like, if your house hasn't been broken into, you're not going to think you need bars on the windows. And then when your house is broken into, then you start to consider having bars on your windows. So it's the same with the world of the internet. Until you felt the pain, you hesitate to implement the protections that are necessary. You will be like, well, everything's fine. So one thing that web developers can do is come with case studies. And another thing that they can do is actually just make it part of what they offer their clients. Meaning, just like, we have mobile, optimization as pretty much a basic part of the packages these days, and other types of optimization, even let's say adding SSL, right? That's a no-brainer. Everyone must be adding SSL. You don't practically even talk to the client about it. You just do it. Maybe CSP is something that you just do as well. The developer needs to be aware that the client might come back to them after, let's say, they try to add a content type that's not yet supported and saying, we need to be updated. But if the developer is offering some kind of maintenance plan, right, which many do have some kind of residual income, then that could potentially cover that, meaning like tweaking the CSP for the user. Yeah.
And does a CSP necessitate an ongoing relationship between developer and client, or can they still be included as part of a one-off project?
So you could make it part of a one-off project, but then if you have a scenario like what we had, where we tried to add the WordPress.tv embed, then the client will get frustrated. And in my web development agency, one of the reasons we offered the maintenance package was to lower frustration, because clients would do the once-off project, take the site, and then they'd be like, we're responsible for updating, no problem. And then they wouldn't update, and then they'd get hacked, and then they would blame us, right? So we're like, okay, we don't want any more of that. So yeah, it's hard to make it once-off. There's a reason that CSP has such a low implementation rate. I think like something like 2% of the top 1 million sites have content security policies. And at WordCamp Europe, I showed that even the White House doesn't have a content security policy, which is crazy. So, and banks don't have it. Like, it's amazing. You can easily run a test on a lot of sites and see if they have it in place or not. Because it's a bit tricky, but on the other hand, in my opinion, it should be considered possibly basic.
Yeah, so it's great that you brought this topic to the WordCamp. Definitely. And where do CSPs fit in with wider issues of security in WordPress space? For example, is it worth developers implementing a CSP if their clients are all using passwords like password 1233?
So then, especially because if their security is poor, then they're going to get hacked, right? I mean, that's pretty much a given. And at the very least, this will prevent malicious scripts from being loaded in the browser for the users. So I would say that the weaker the security, the more important it is to implement. Yeah.
And do you have some recommendations on tools or plugins to make your CSP journey a little bit easier?
So in my talk, which I mean, hopefully it can be linked to or something, I list tools, and we wrote out a post which also lists all of them with links, all of them on our site. So securityheader.io or securityheaders.io is a great first step. It's a really easy way to plug a URL in there and get an idea of the security state of a particular website. So that would be the first step. And it tells you what you have in place and where the problems are. So that's a great like leading tool to lead with. There's another one called Report UI. I don't remember exactly. I have it in my talk. And what it does is it is like a wizard type of tool to enable you to create your content security policy, because that's a bit tricky, getting the format right and making sure that you've covered what you need to cover. So it's like checkboxes, and you fill in like, I only want to allow images to load from this domain. Boom, you get your content security policy. It's really amazing. There's a Windows only tool. Unfortunately, it's not for Mac. It's called Fiddler, and that is the best tool. And there needs to be more of them, particularly a Mac supported one. They have a Mac one, but it's not fully fleshed out. It will analyze a page and tell you what types of content are on there and need to be authorized by the content security policy. That's the hardest thing. That's what I'm talking about, us easily blocking ourselves. It gives you a list of the resources that you need to authorize in your content security policy so your page loads properly. Fonts, by the way, are a tricky one. Users can easily block their own fonts if they're loading from, let's say, Google Fonts or a third party. Other tools, I think those are good ones to start, but I do have that list in my talk, and there's some really, really great tools there. Oh, and one other thing. So you can create the CSP on the server level, like in Nginx or Apache, and send it to the browser. But if a developer doesn't, maybe the client's going to be hosting it, who knows where, they don't have access to the server, or they don't want to deal with it that way, you can actually put CSPs in the meta code of the site. There's a few that aren't supported there, but they're used less, so it's not such a big deal. And that's a really easy way to get started with implementing it. And then it's also easy to modify it as needed. And theoretically, if you have a savvy enough clients, then they can also edit the meta data of the site on that level and update it as necessary. So that's pretty far-fetched. So those are some hopefully useful things.
These are great tips to start, definitely. What would you like to see happen to encourage greater use of CSPs on WordPress?
So I think the conversation just needs to get started. There are some plugins, by the way, that have been created for WordPress, but I would just go this straight. They seemed a bit problematic. I didn't test out some of them. I would just go this more straightforward route. But what I saw after my talk was people who are very savvy developers, came up to me after the talk to say that they had never heard of content security policies. It totally makes sense. I hadn't heard of, not that I'm that savvy, but I've been in the industry for a while and I do care about security. And I had never heard about content security policies until maybe a year ago when our CTO joined Stratic, and he comes from the world of cybersecurity. And he's taught me a lot. He taught me about content security policies. So there needs to be a discussion around it, greater, maybe more talks at WordCamps about it, so that more and more people can be exposed to even the existence of CSPs and also content security headers in general. I think it's, we're in the WordPress world, we're very focused on the typical types of hacks, and it totally makes sense because that's what generally is happening, SQL injections, process scripting. But there is that extra layer that we can all add for ourselves and our users. It's just a matter of awareness. So I think that's probably what it is. So by you guys even talking about it, I think that's a great start.
So thanks a lot, Miriam. It was super interesting.
Thank you. Nice talking to you.